All right. Some critics of GamerGate argue that GamerGate was mostly or entirely right-wing. Do you think this was accurate?
No, I don't think it was. I think that a great deal of polling was done on the political leanings of Gamergaters, and it found that most Gamergaters were left-wing libertarians. And most of the accusations that Gamergate is entirely or predominantly right-wing are based on either assuming that all of these Gamergaters are lying about their political affiliations, or that, the people who are making the accusation just have a view of left and right that definitely does not correspond to the mainstream American Overton window. It might be what's left and right in the artsy hipster scene in San Francisco, but it's not where the bar of left and right are for the country as a whole, let alone the world.
Do you want to talk about your political views or philosophy?
Okay, sure. I actually took one of these tests once, and it told me that I'm a social libertarian. And I think that's about an accurate summation of me. Most of my views are sort of boilerplate DemSoc. I supported Bernie Sanders in both of his presidential campaigns, ultimately rolled my eyes and grudgingly pulled the lever for Clinton and then Biden. I think that our primary focus as a society in terms of political change should be on income inequality, on important social programs like healthcare, and on preventing environmental catastrophe, mostly through making corporations and the extremely wealthy pay their share in taxes, and then putting this additional tax revenue into programs like healthcare, universal basic income, environmental initiatives, things like that. Environmental initiatives that work, mind you, like, regulating ludicrous polluting and greening up our power grid by building new nuclear plants, not making people drink through paper straws. That's just stupid and not helping anyone. But I am very critical of identity politics in general, whether it is coming from the left with wokeness or coming from the right with more classical forms of identitarianism, white supremacist groups, racial separatists, things like that. And I am not against most limits on personal freedom. I think people should be allowed to have pot, they should be allowed to have guns, they should be allowed to have porn, they should be allowed to have whatever gay book Ron DeSantis is trying to ban in Florida, etc., etc., etc. I think that where feasible, we should have maximized individual freedom, including definitely freedom of speech, and the government should be acting as the guarantor of rights, not the grantor of those rights. And I think oftentimes that means that the role of government is as the defender of the rights of the individual from very powerful non-state actors such as major corporations. And sometimes that puts me in conflict with other elements of the left who want to make exceptions to some of those principles when it's convenient, such as wanting to put legal restrictions on speech where they consider it to be hate speech. And, like I've said, I think it's sometimes okay to say that certain speech is over the line to the point that going to someone's advertisers or something is justified. But I don't think that even the most overtly hateful speech should be outright illegal. I think that's too far. But I think that my views are definitely within the left of center mainstream.
Do you think your views are pretty similar to most people involved with Gamergate?
I think my views are pretty similar to the people who were involved with Gamergate around 2014 to 2016. I think that since then, there was a slow overall drift rightwards. I would say that on average, the remaining Gamergate communities today could probably fairly be described as center-right in terms of the majority of the people who frequent them. And this is in large part, I think, a self-fulfilling prophecy that many of these people, these anti-Gamergate critics, repeated the idea that Gamergate is right-wing so many times that a lot of right-wing people decided to join Gamergate, and it affected the overall political leanings of the movement.
You don't think it was the case that large numbers of people went from being left-wing to right-wing?
I think that happened in the cases of some people, but I also think that some people just stayed put in their politics while the goalposts moved around them. Like, compared to the games journalists, if you're not in favor of it being okay to, I don't know, surgically transition a 4-year-old, then you're right wing. But that would definitely not be the center point of the broader transgender debate for the country as a whole. If you ask the median swing voter in a purple state what they think of something like that, it is not going to be where the games journalists think that the goalposts of left and right are.
Aren't you strawmanning the games journalist right now?
I don't think so. I have directly heard arguments for the transitioning of very, very young children, including by irreversible medical means. I don't think that is like the mainstream left-wing position, but it's the position of many of these super woke hipster activists that games journalism does have a lot of.
Do you think there can be any value in analyzing games or other works of art through a political lens?
Depends on the game. I think that, if it's Metal Gear Solid or it's Witcher 3, then yeah, there's a lot of political themes and a lot of very deep content that can have a lot of interesting political implications. But if you're trying to write a Marxist critique of of Kirby or, you know, a paleo-conservative take on Yoshi, I think that that's idiotic, frankly. I think that it just ain't that deep, bro. It just ain't that deep.
Let's explore that. Really, do you think everything's political?
No, not. Let me put it this way. Do you think everything is radioactive?
Probably to some extent, or at least everything that I am aware of on our planet, I guess.
When somebody says to you, stay away from that, it's radioactive, you know what they mean, right?
But could it be political in a way that's actually important, right? Like I buy a new pair of shoes. You might say, well, that's not political. You just bought shoes. Well, is it political though? Because like, what am I doing by buying shoes? I'm doing a couple of different things, right? One, I'm, I guess, de
Yes, you're
facto
engaging with
supporting.
labor and monetary systems and all of that, but that
Right.
gets back to my radiation metaphor. Just like in the most technical sense, everything is radioactive. Everything emits some tiny trace minute amount of radiation. But when we talk about radioactive materials, we mean things like plutonium. We don't mean a banana. Nobody is going to swat a banana out of your hand and say, "Don't touch that! It's radioactive!" Even though, technically, a banana does have a tiny amount of radioactive potassium in it. But it's not enough to be meaningful. It's not enough that the radiation can harm you. Likewise, if you want to play 6 Degrees of Kevin Bacon, you can link pretty much anything that anyone does to politics in some indirect, tangential way. But that doesn't mean that it's political in the way that going to a rally to listen to a candidate speak is political. And some media is very political. Some media is essentially an author's thesis statement on a contemporary political issue. While other media, you would really, really, really have to jump through hoops to find a connection to modern politics that wouldn't sound rather laughable to the average person.
I'm not sure if that's certainly the case.
Okay, what's the political significance of Kirby's Dream Land?
I've not played the Kirby games except for one on Game Boy years ago, so I'm not sure that's like the
I
world's
think
greatest
that
example.
is the one. That was the one I'm talking about is the original Game Boy Kirby's Dream Land.
Dude, this was when I was like 7 years old. I'm not sure we want to go back to.
Okay.
Don't say don't.
What's
Shoot. Um. How about Pikmin? I played Pikmin recently.
now that's one I haven't played.
Oh damn. Okay. Shoot. We'll be here all day. Well, let's just say this. I think that there can be some things that are political that actually they don't seem political on their face, but like actually do carry with them like certain like normative connotations, right? So let's
Sometimes.
say like
Sometimes.
like let's say you have a movie, and in the movie there's a large banquet. Let's say Harry Potter, right? The Harry Potter. Have you seen those?
Yeah.
Okay, you know how they have that big
Yeah.
massive banquet.
Before the writer went nuts. But yeah.
Yeah. Well, the massive banquet. There's food there, and some of the food there is meat, right?
Okay.
Is having them eat meat a political act?
No, and even less so with the wizards because they just wave their wand and the meat appears. They didn't actually
Yeah,
kill any.
that's a bad example. Let's say hypothetically that they actually killed the animals through factory farming. Let's say that were hypothetically the case. Would it then have political significance?
I don't think to most people. I think that that's a stretch. I
But it,
mean, the political vegans, the PETA types, they're a really fringe outside the Overton window movement. For all the Sturm und Drang on certain right-wing websites, nobody's going to ban meat. That's not a remotely considerable option within American politics.
but the
I think,
decision to portray eating meat as normal is, I think, like kind of political.
but it is normal. It's simply reflecting reality. Now, somebody may not like that that's normal, but it factually is. The vast majority of people eat at least some meat in their diets. Now, maybe the average person, if pressed, will look at some of these factory farming tactics and go, yeesh. Maybe it's reasonable to say, if you can, shell out that extra dollar for free range. But no, you're not going to convince the average person to be vegan. And if you're just reflecting the reality of the world as it is in fiction, I don't think that that's a political act. You're not endorsing it by depicting it. You're just showing what people typically do.
Okay. What about games like Call of Duty, especially the ones set in modern settings, where you're fighting terrorists? Are they political?
I think a more reasonable argument can be made that they're political, yes. I think that some of them, in fact, have even worked hand in glove with the U.S. Defense Department and been deliberately designed for recruiting purposes. I think that can reasonably be called political. But if instead of setting it in a modern real-world war with a real-world country fighting its real-world enemy and essentially having it function as war propaganda, it's set in space and you're fighting, bug monsters or hell demons or what have you, then you're much more reaching to call the content political.
One of the most political works out there, perhaps, involves fighting bug monsters. Do you know what I'm talking about?
Starship Troopers?
Yeah.
But
I'm trolling.
Starship Troopers is also satirical.
Only the
It's
movie
not.
is.
It's. I haven't actually read the books, honestly. I have not read the books.
The book's good.
I saw the movies because boobs, and I was like a teenager at the time. They were never good, but they were funny.
Yeah.
But
people are gonna give me so much shit for saying that the book's good. I feel like the book is actually a very interesting work.
I haven't read the book. I don't know if it's good. I know the guy who wrote it has some weird views.
He's not even so. People perceive dude. I don't want. Maybe we should cut this part out of the book, dude. If people think I'm camping for Robert Heinlein, they're gonna. Which I am actually. I'm defending Robert Heinlein to an extent. Like I think he was actually a pretty progressive person for the time, and people look back now and they're like, "Oh my God, he's a moral monster." Because he did like write one book, I think, that had like kind of like racist stuff against Chinese people in it. Like that's obviously not good. But like he wrote a bunch of other books too that were advocating for like Starship Troopers. They advocate for this is not going in the book. This part we just cut this But Starship Troopers, they depict a egalitarian society with men and women in the military. This is like the 1950s,
Because, but
dude.
that's because every single person is just a body to throw into the meat grinder.
Well, they also, I mean, they depict.
They're not doing that because they're great feminist allies. They're doing that because they need twice the soldiers, or we're all gonna die.
Well, no, I think he actually does. Like the main character of the book is Hispanic, right? He's like he actually was like super progressive.
Movie wasn't.
His last name's
Wow,
Rico, right?
you could not do that today.
In the movie, well, in the movie, he's like a white Hispanic though, right? Because he still has the name Rico.
Yeah, but is he even supposed to be? I mean, is Casper Van Dien Hispanic at all? I was.
Oh, you mean the actor? I'm sorry. I thought you meant
to think about it like that at the time.
Bro,
I was too young to question why all of these people have Spanish names, and yet this is blatantly just a bunch of white people.
I'm from Buenos Aires, and I said give them hell.
Yeah, I was too young to notice that, but you could not get away with that today, and you probably shouldn't.
Well, yeah, dude, how much, dude? Should we just cut the whole Starship Troopers part out?
Maybe.
It's up to you, man. This is your part of the segment. Do you want the Starship Troopers part in the book? We can keep it or not.
I am comfortable with whatever. Okay. I stand by my words.
I stand by my words too.
My words.
But
I was a teenager at the time I saw that movie. I am not responsible for being an idiot.
Yeah, no, I agree. I stand by my words too. But the thing is, I feel like have you ever made an argument and you're like, you know what, this is true, but I'm going to get so much shit for making this particular point that I should probably just like make a different point that or just avoid that part of the argument altogether and focus.
Sometimes, but I honestly try not to. I try not to self-censor like that. I don't like to give in to fear. I don't like to give in to the heckler's veto.
Yeah, you know what? Fuck it. Robert Heinlein wasn't a moral monster, and we shouldn't demonize him as a moral monster. At least, unless he did shit that I don't know about. Maybe he did. I don't know. Maybe like a
you know what?
Or something.
Fuck it. That movie was good because boobs.
Yeah. Also, killing giant fucking insects. Okay, nothing wrong with that.
But seriously, the actual politics in Starship Troopers aside, many games since have used some sort of insectoid alien monsters as the bad guys. And usually that is not political. It is obvious to almost everyone that if a swarm of alien locusts descended on Earth and tried to eat all of our biomatter, we would just fucking kill them if we could. You can't negotiate with the biomatter eating locusts.
Some people say. Oh, so actually, we talked about this before. You said that GamerGate wasn't the first battle of the culture war, but it's the first one where people fought back. What do you mean by that? What does that mean to you?
Before GamerGate, there were a number of incidents involving the social justice warriors screaming people into submission and sometimes ruining lives. There was the elevator gate bit, there was that dongle incident, and of course there was Anita Sarkeesian's Kickstarter and the harassment of women narrative around that 2 years prior, and going all the way back to probably the first battle that I recall was that Penny Arcade Dick Wolves comic. And ultimately, they screamed and screamed and screamed until the Penny Arcade people apologized for the Dick Wolf joke, which I will never forget. Every time I watch an episode of a Law and Order show, and at the end it says, made by Dick Wolf.
You keep using the phrase well, maybe not keep using. You've brought it up a couple times. The phrase social justice warriors. Do you think using terminology like that is useful?
I do. I think that there is a problem with this distinct ideology existing, whether you call it social justice, wokeness, what have you, that has some pretty clear tenets, but it refuses to name itself or to really acknowledge its own existence. And, you know, where pretty much every ideology has some accepted nomenclature for what to call it. You know, we can define what communism is. We can define what democracy is. We can define what fascism is, etc., etc., etc. These belief systems, these structures, they have accepted terminology. But this thing we call wokeness, it refuses to accept any sort of name. The proponents for it, you can clearly tell that there's a shared belief system with particular views and particular prescriptions for social change, but none of them seem to want to acknowledge it as a specific thing, to name it, or to define it beyond, well, this is just being a good person. And that limits people's ability to talk about it, to discuss it, to criticize it. And I've seen some very compelling arguments made that preventing people from criticizing it is really the point of not naming it. That it's a kind of social camouflage, that they just want to blend it into the background of society and slowly normalize it while pretending that nothing is really changing. And if they refuse to name themselves, if they refuse to come up with a term for their ideology, then other people are going to come up with one. Largely, their critics will come up with one. We need a name for it. We can't just gesture wildly in the vague direction of certain ideological tenets and say, you know, the thing. So people come up with names. They come up with social justice warrior. They come up with wokeness. I've seen successor ideology as a term for it. I've seen left identitarianism. I've seen people respond to the term alt-right by describing these people as the control left, which I thought was cute, but isn't really going to catch on outside of tech circles. But if they don't like it, if they don't like woke or social justice warrior or something, they are free to come up with a name, and I am willing to use that name as long as it's something neutral sounding. I will not call them the defenders of justice or what have you. But if they can come up with a reasonably neutral sounding descriptive term for their ideology that they prefer, I'll go with that. I'm not looking to insult them and be super pejorative, but woke and SJW are the terms that have caught on in common parlance because they refuse to come up with anything better.
You mentioned the harassment narrative around Anita Sarkeesian's Kickstarter. Do you think Anita did receive harassment?
Absolutely. There is no way that of hundreds of thousands of people sending her messages, there wasn't some absolute asshole who told her to unalive herself. There absolutely was.
What do you think of the framing of Gamergate as a battle within the left, between those who believe in small L liberal democratic values and those who don't?
I think that is partially what happened, but while a lot of Gamergaters were left-wing, many were also centrist or conservative. I don't think that Gamergate at the time had an inherent left or right political affiliation as an overall movement. But I definitely think that in terms of what it advocated, those small L liberal values like free speech, basic fairness, neutral institutions, things like that were definitely agreed upon points of interest and of, common goals among most Gamergaters.
Now we're